Welcome, everyone, to the Ghost Helpers podcast. I'm your host, Tina Erwin, and I am the head ghost helper. Our goal is to discuss all kinds of things that are paranormal and some things that are now normal for people who would never have imagined it. We cover a wide range of topics, and today our topic is all about psychic animals. And I have with me my friend Charity Dawson, who wrote the foreword for part 2 of Psychic Children, Psychic People. And that's the basis for a lot of the discussion. So, Charity, welcome, and talk a little bit about how we met and your topic today, please.
How we met was I was having some issues within my home that a friend that is a medium was not able to help me with. And I was at a loss and I was very scared and my home felt uncomfortable. And it was a place that I used to love. And now I was frightened. And because I had listened to many of your podcasts, Tina, I thought, well, maybe this lady can help me. She remote views. Maybe she can remote view my house and help me. And that's when I had sent an email and you responded that day and I was thrilled. And we chatted shortly thereafter. And you did, in fact, help me remote view my home and rid the house. You helped me we helped each other, but you helped me to rid my house of some of the dark things that were here.
And it was, every experience with every client is a learning curve, even for me. I've done this a long time, but there's no two clients are the same. So I think it worked out to be a very happy collaboration, shall we say. So what's your question? What's our topic today?
I wanted to talk about animals because I have two dogs. One is a 3-year-old Bernadoodle, and the other one is a 6-year-old Cavapoo. And I've noticed that they within the house now that I'm paying attention, I notice them and what they're doing. And when they're staring off at something or when they're scared and they're near me, I could see them watching and looking at things. And then I know, oh, I probably have something here. And that's when I cross whatever is here over. And sometimes with the help of my son, I'm able to find out who it is, why they're here, and help them to cross over to the other side.
That is really awesome. And I'm sharing with our listeners that you recently asked me about a problem you were having or observing. Maybe it's not a problem, a behavior that you were observing with one of your dogs in a certain location.
Yes. The Bernadoodle, Tilly is her name. Recently, she's been hanging out in my closet. And my house is on a raised foundation, and there's a crawl space opening in my closet. And I have a rug over it, like a little area rug. And she often is on top of that crawl space opening door. And I had been told that there has had been, in fact, a portal underneath my house. And through a friend had told me, a friend with abilities, that she is there protecting and keeping at bay whatever may come in and out. And she's in there. She likes to hang out in there.
Okay. I think this happens to a lot of people, and I think it's a great question. And with all great questions, sometimes it's a wonderful opportunity to do an experiment. And one of the easiest experiments to do, and because a dog doesn't know a placebo effect, a dog only knows the truth of what the animal sees, feels, or hears from another level. And so my suggestion to you would be to take a large piece of heavy duty, like you would use on a grill, a really heavy duty piece of aluminum foil, shiny side down, and cover the whole area where the crawl space is.
Okay.
And then put the rug on top of it.
Okay.
And then mark the date that you did that. and then observe your dog's behavior after that. Because the reason you're doing that is a aluminum foil has a mirror effect. Both sides have the somewhat of the mirror effect, but the shiny side is extremely reflective. And when you put that aluminum foil shiny side down, your whatever is trying to come up, and there really shouldn't be anything, but we live in a really strange world right now. And there are a lot of earthquake tremors going on. And just an aside note, an earthquake tremor or a fault line or even a new fault line, because the earth isn't static, it's always moving and changing. So you could have a fault line, and along that line, you could have something that opened up. And it's not like you're going to say, oh my gosh, I have a fault line and something's opened up. Your dog is the canary in the coal mine, shall we say. Try this experiment.
I will, for sure.
There are two other things that you can do in this case, because one of the goals of this podcast is to provide people with practical potential solutions to what seem like really impossible paranormal problems.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is you could use a crossing over prayer card, which they're for sale on GhostHelpers. Or you can just copy it and print it out and put it between two sheets of paper and face it down.
Okay.
And you can print out the Dark Intelligence Removal Prayer, which is in the Psychic Children book, and it's also in the Crossing Over Prayer book. I think it's number 34. And print that out and also face it down. So you can start with the foil. If that solves it, you're good. If it doesn't, then escalate it a little bit and then keep a record of what you found. And maybe in a future podcast, we'll be able to tell everyone what you found out when you did this. And
Tina, I have a question. With printing out the prayers, how does that help? Does it have a frequency because of the words in the prayer?
Oh, yes. Oh,
Okay.
it has a major frequency. In the beginning, when God created the universes, in the beginning was the Word. They believe it to be AUM. When words have meaning, power, and frequency, that's why in the discussion of Masaru Emoto's work, Messages from Water, every word has a certain power. When you say, I love you, you can feel that energy. When you say a very detrimental set of words and you string them together, those words create a lower frequency. So the prayers have a very high frequency. In fact, there's a video of a woman who received a copy of the Crossing Over Prayer book, and it was sitting on her desk, and her cat was so obsessed with the book that they couldn't pry the cat from it. The cat kept pawing the book like something was shining or moving from the book that only the cat could see.
Interesting.
So yes, that's an excellent question. I'm so glad you asked that question. So those words are powerful because they work between dimensions. They're filled with the power of love and a major connection to the divine. And that's why this works.
When I do have them also printed and put underneath the kids' mattresses, should I have it up or facing down, or?
I would have them facing up. Well, if it's the Dark Intelligence Removal Prayer, face it down.
Okay.
And maybe the Crossing Over Prayer. But if it's a prayer for love and for healing, which are also in that book, face it up.
Okay.
Another thing that you can do, which actually my husband and I started doing, is during the night, because there's so many weird frequencies right now with cell phone towers and satellites and all kinds of chaotic energy. Sometimes it's nice to have a frequency that you can control that overrides that And that can be the solfeggio frequencies, which is an Italian word, solfeggio, 528 hertz. And it's a healing frequency. But let's say you can't find that. Let's say that you just wanted to play Mozart all night or Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which they're finding dramatically is seeming to have the potential to destroy cancer cells. That's still an experiment. But when you're, again, the higher the frequency, the more powerful that energy is for the human body, and it helps align the cells. It helps the body go back into a wonderful healing balance, because when you're asleep at night, the body is receiving healing. That's when the body does all of its healing. The conscious self just kind of travels at night, but the subconscious is working on bringing the body back into balance and healing. So you can further the efforts of your subconscious by playing those solfeggio frequencies. And oh, by the way, they're going to have a wonderful effect on the animals in your house. And considering how staggeringly expensive vet bills are, anything you can do that will help additionally your animals receive healing in the sleep state, this is going to be a side benefit.
So, question with the animals. What is the veil between our dimension and the other dimensions so much thinner? That's why they can see them, they can feel them.
Animals have, from what I can gather, have almost always had the ability to see between dimensions. And that seems like this weird thing. But when you consider that when a person walks into a house, my brother was dating this woman and many years ago, and she said, "You must be a wonderful person because my dog hates everyone." And when he walked through the door, the dog just plastered himself against my brother and looked at him with this love, in his eyes. And she was pretty astonished at that. So where I'm going with this is, if you have a person who walks in your house, again, animals don't know what's politically correct. And the animal says to you through their behavior, I mean, it's like, your children, your animals. When your animal looks at someone and backs away, it's like Danger Will Robinson, because they can see that person's auric field, that force field, the immune system around the person. They can also see if that person has ghosts with them, because animals are incredibly intuitive. In fact, a friend of mine, oh my gosh, it's been almost 30 years now, 30 years ago, told the story of a kitten she received. And this kitten would play. And then all of a sudden she realized, as she's watching her cat, that the kitten is playing with another cat, but my friend couldn't see the cat. And they're playing tag, and it was obvious this cat was playing with a ghost cat. And then her cat just starts barreling at full speed, and the ghost cat, barreled right through the wall, and her kitty about knocked herself senseless trying to follow the ghost kitty. And she said, "Don't you think that's amazing?" And I said, "Well, I know I won't forget that soon." So yes, they have that ability to see those things.
It's interesting too, because the younger dog Tilly, she will just stare into the sky outside, like intently at things. She's just watching, and you could just follow her eyes, and she's just looking at stuff. It's kind of a trip. And there's been times where it'll be quiet in the house. I'll be sitting on the couch, and she'll be laying next to me sleeping, and she will just like burst up and like run and start barking out, like at the door outside, like looking outside. So clearly she's aware of something.
They are. And it's, how does a dog know when somebody enters your property? How are they able to know that? And you remember in the Star Wars films, they would always say, "There's a disturbance in the force." Well, I hate to become super scientific, but it's all about string theory. So if you have a string, which is a frequency, it's what's almost called the monochord, and the string is just stable, or if you visualized a pond and it's glass calm, if you're over here and something enters that pond, it's a ripple effect. So the energy of whatever that is that maybe we can't see or feel has now disturbed the energy environment around a specific location. What is the degree? How far can a dog sense? I think it depends on the sensitivity of the dog. Some dogs are dumb as rocks and don't have any psychic ability at all, really. And some dogs, I mean, they are just tuned in.
Oh,
They notice everything.
It's crazy. And
Yeah.
a lot of times too, like if one of the kids, we had one of the kids just had surgery to repair something in his knee, and that dog Tilly was literally in his bed the whole time he recovered.
Yes, because my brother broke his wrist and his cat laid her body on his wrist the whole time, because the dog, it's not that the dog is being loyal, which the dog is, and the dog is being loyal and loving, and that's wonderful. But an animal's whole goal is the service of the family that that dog's part of. And they can try and give the human being healing.
It's pretty wild.
It is wild, but I would be willing to bet you there are going to be listeners out there who say, "Oh my gosh, that happened to me. I was so ill and my dog was there." So what is the dog doing when it's with you? The dog is emanating the frequency of pure, unadulterated love, compassion, and loyalty to that person. The animal has no agenda. Yes, they want you to get better and go outside and play with them again. But on another level, depending on the sophistication level of the dog, and some dogs are just pretty amazing, that animal can focus on healing the person who is ill. And whether it's a broken bone or an ACL or something like that in a knee, the animal wants to plaster themselves on you, and they're giving you a form of healing.
Do you think that animals are put into our lives for a reason? Like this particular dog is here because of my home, the children in it that have abilities. Is this dog here for us for a reason?
I have had so many people tell me this, that they just knew that the dog was sent to them. And there's a story about this couple that got this cat from the pound, and they weren't too sure. And the cat was kind of old and kind of blind. But they took the cat in, and somebody was burglarizing their house. And the cat let out a shriek and attacked the attacker. You have a cat, with claws at you. They were able to get blood because the cat just shredded the burglar. They were able to call the police, and the individual was in fact arrested. No one can convince them that this cat wasn't sent there to save them. The man was armed. And I hear this repeatedly. In fact, one day, this creamsicle colored kitty appeared on my son's doorstep and adopted the family. And they just adopted him right back. And they're all getting to, it's only been 2 weeks, and it's just kind of still a new, strange thing. So I thought that very thing, why did this cat appear in their lives at this moment in time? Let's make it even stranger, because I mentioned to my sister we were going to do this show. And she said, well, remember, I had a dream about a cat that had these markings like a cow, a black spot and a white spot. And the very next day, my neighbor comes over. The very next morning, my neighbor comes over and says, this cat just appeared, and I don't think this cat is for me. And my sister looks at the cat and said, "This is the cat in my dreams."
How
This cat was
crazy.
with them for 20 years.
Wow.
And while nothing untoward happened, the cat was there for some reason that they never quite understood. But sometimes a human being has a need or a longing, and an animal can come to them. If you don't have a spouse, or your spouse has passed away, or your partner, the unconditional love that an animal gives affects certain elements and areas in the brain and helps bring a human being a sense of hope. They actually were all kinds of studies in the 80s and 90s with AIDS patients. AIDS patients who were given animals to care for, these people were terminal. And they said, "Why would you give a terminal person a cat or a dog?" And they said, "It was an experiment. We asked these people if they would go ahead and," can you hear me still?
Yes.
If they asked these people if they would like to have an animal just to keep them company. People who were supposed to die in 3 months were still alive 2 and 3 years later. They had to be alive to take care of their pet.
They had
So
purpose.
the pet affected their long-term ability to live. It gave them hope. And for a lot of people, they have never experienced the depth of grief as when a pet dies. I had Siamese cats for years and years. And, when I think about the love and the companionship, it's just mind boggling. My husband spent 42 years at sea. And I had a science, they would come and go as, animals don't live that long, especially cats. And they were always there for me.
Yeah.
And it was so amazing to have that it helped me get through some very long and lonely nights. So even after all this time, I have this amazing connection, and I can burst into tears if I think about that cat, that energy, that love. And in fact, when someone dies, you can make a request that the animals over their lifetime who have graced their life meet them upon death. I did that when my brother died. And all of these animals who were loyal and true and loving for him met him at death. I'm sure there were
Right.
other people, but it was a very glorious reunion.
It's pretty awesome. Is it possible, Tina, since we did touch on portals earlier, can we talk about that?
We can. Go ahead.
What are they? Why are they here? Are they all bad? Are there good portals?
The problem with the portal is it's like leaving your door open and you don't have a clue who's going to walk in or what their rationale or their reason is. There's no reason for anyone to have an open portal in their home. If you're meditating and you're connecting to the divine, to angels, that's not a portal. That's a personal spiritual connection, and it's different. A portal is something where other beings who are not of the higher realms enter your home. So no, it's not a good thing.
Okay.
And sometimes a portal can be a mirror. If you go back to Grimm's fairy tales, to all the stories of magic in the past, what you're going to find is that a mirror can be an astounding portal. If you think you have a mirror that is a portal, then you would need to really focus on writing on the back of the mirror God, love, Christ, hope, happiness. And that will, in fact, shut the portal. And when you shut the portal, that makes just a gigantic difference.
And how do you go about shutting one?
Well, if it's a mirror, you're going to write all these things down.
But if it's in the ground, in the earth?
If it's in the earth, you can do some extremely basic things. At the craft stores sell a stiff mylar that's shiny. I have made crosses, big crosses, like 2 feet wide by 4 feet long. If you think you have a portal in your yard, and how would you know that? And it can, sometimes a portal can be an intersection of a toxic ley line. And you aren't going to, you can tell that because a tree might be diseased, or it never does well, or it will have growths on it like it's not well. And that's a toxic ley line. And that's a kind of a different discussion. But a portal that is in that area, you can take one of these crosses and put them in a large plastic bag and just bury them and just face it over where you think the area is, and you will close it. I can do it in a remote view, but let's say that, I was abducted by aliens and I'm not available. Okay, you would need to know how to do these things yourself. And crosses, especially size matters. The bigger the cross, the better. And if you don't want to do a cross because that may seem awkward or you can't get to a craft store, just put aluminum foil facing down, or an old mirror, bury it there. If it's a place where there's high traffic, then you can be a little bit creative, but you have to do something that closes it. And when you're changing the frequency, for instance, you could put something like, go to a garden store and get a statue of St. Francis of Assisi, or statues of an angel, where you sit it over it. Now you've immediately changed the frequency, and it's not necessarily obvious to someone.
Okay. That is helpful.
So one of the other questions might be, how does a portal become opened if it's not a ley line?
Yes.
And that the answer is, if you're doing a Ouija board, if you're holding seances, if you are doing things like doing tarot cards, angel cards, runes, you're doing any kind of fortune telling, you automatically open a portal in your home. It's just the easiest way to begin to close it is to burn the cards. And I do mean angel cards. And there are several psychics that had been doing all of these things, and they have finally begun to realize that they're not a good thing. And they're now telling people to burn their cards. It's not just me. I'm not the only one. And if you have a Ouija board, and I hear people say, well, I don't use the cards, and I don't use the Ouija board. I don't care. If you had something on your kitchen counter that was full of maggots, wouldn't you get rid of it?
Yes.
Well, having a Ouija board or tarot cards is probably going to upset some people, but oh well. It's like having, a pot full of maggots on your kitchen counter. It's that detrimental to you. It makes a huge difference that you get rid of those things. They're not helping you.
And I was told with my home that there was a portal on the other side of the house, and it was created because we had somebody come in and do some work underneath the house for air ventilation for the AC heater system. So there was a vent put there, and somebody had told me that is a portal because somebody opened it up from underneath your home.
I would disagree with that.
Okay.
That would make everybody paranoid about having any work done underneath their home, and that would tend to make me crazy.
Can people open up their own portal besides just having Toro and Ouija board?
Yes, if somebody is. It's not quite as easy as you think to open them if you don't have tools of black magic.
Okay.
Sometimes it can be done with violent video games. That will open a portal pretty quickly because the violence lowers the frequency. when you lower the frequency, it's like in a home with a high frequency, you have a strong door with good locks, and maybe you have cameras outside and you're protecting your home, or you have a fence around your home. You have layers of protection to make things work. If you are practicing any form of magic, or you're telling futures, or you're reading palms, and you're accessing the fourth dimension and the beings that are there, you're asking for something to come in. It lowers your frequency. If you're doing violent video games, if all you're watching are really violent things, you can open a doorway. And one of the most hideous things I saw recently, well, actually, it was several years ago, the Batman movie that had Heath Ledger and Morgan Freeman, and I don't remember all the other actors who were in it. Morgan Freeman almost died, and not long after that, Heath Ledger did die. And the video that came out, if you played that particular Batman video, it was so bad it would open a portal.
Wow.
And a friend of mine bought one, and I got a phone call, and he said, "Why does this feel so bad?" And I said, "Burn it, cut it in half, break it. It's so dark." So not having the violence, you don't need it in your life. You wouldn't want it to happen to you, and you don't want to be in resonance with it. If the another thing that will open up a portal on a huge level, or anything from Nazi Germany, a gun. A lot of people have German Lugers or World War II cufflinks, or things, or helmets or jackets or swords, or anything that came from the SS or a Nazi soldier that maybe a veteran brought back from the Second World War. Those are so dark. It will just open up the door to hell.
Huh.
I had a woman in Virginia Beach who called me, and she was telling me all these terrible things were happening. And this woman had 100 mirrors in her house. That alone was, I mean, I have a few mirrors, but not 100 mirrors. My gosh. And they made your skin crawl when you walked through the room. It's like something was watching you. And she said, we're all going nuts here. Okay. So I was teaching her how to treat the mirrors, but there was one mirror, and I said, I got to tell you, maybe you can take the glass out. And her kids came rushing up, and they said, can we kill it? Can we break the mirror? And the mother said, yes. They got a big black plastic bag. They got a hammer, and I couldn't believe the strength as those kids are smashing that mirror. And they said, finally, we're free. It's like, whoa.
Wow.
That mirror was, in fact, a portal. And so the Nazi stuff was awful. In her house, when she asked me to remote view it, I said, you have something from Nazi Germany in addition to these horrible mirrors. She got really mad at me, which happens a lot. I do not have anything from Nazi Germany. How dare you? I wouldn't have that in my home. Okay. I'm just the messenger. You have something, and it's opened up a massive doorway. Well, I was in Virginia Beach visiting my sister. The woman invited us over, and she's showing us things. And so she goes into her closet. She pulls out this enormous box. I mean, a big box. And on the side of it is burned into the wood the German swastika. She had a painting that the Nazis had stolen.
Oh my goodness.
And she owned it. And I said, bingo, there's your Nazi symbol. And she said, oh my God, there isn't any way you could ever have known that. And I said, well, that would be for sure.
Wow.
And she said, what should I do? And I said, well, this is a Nazi, part of the Nazi stolen material. This should go to the federal government and get it out of your house. You should not own this. It's so bad.
Tina, do you remember when we first talked, and the home that I'm in, grandfather that lived here and built the home, he worked at Folsom Prison, and
He brought stuff with him.
He had stuff, and I got rid of like there was so much stuff from him working at the prison, and there were calendars, and there's a granite piece of slab from the prison with like an award or something on it for him. And there was a bar of one of the prison cells. And I had seen that in this house forever. And all of a sudden, when we talked, you had said, okay, you need to get rid of that. That's metal. Like that holds a lot of memory and
predecessor energy.
Up until like 3 months ago, I just came across it randomly. I'd been looking for it, and I just found it. So I need to get rid of that.
Yes. It's surprising how we have things and we don't recognize them. So back to this house in Virginia Beach.
Uh-huh.
So not only does this woman have a Nazi painting, creepy mirrors, she went to a plantation in Alabama that was a Civil War prison. And she brought back the floorboards from the Civil War hospital that were soaked in the blood of the Civil War soldiers treated at that hospital. And because I said, these floors are oddly red. And she was so proud of this. And I said,
oh my
God. Doesn't it occur? You brought all this death energy into your house. Do you see that? And she went, oh, that never occurred to me. I just thought they were beautiful wood. I said, I get the floors replaced. Or start writing on the slab, love and peace and God, and cross them over, and let's just really work on this.
Wow.
In addition, she brought back the columns from the plantation house. So the columns would have had slave energy as the predecessor energy. So when somebody says that house has problems, this house took it to a whole new level.
Wow. How is it now?
She was in a divorce situation in which she wanted to sell the house. And she said, do your thing so I can get my house sold. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so much. It's like, where do I begin? But the house sold, and then those people sold it again. But the house is now able to be turned over as people live there, and they do better. What made it even harder was at the back of the house, because it's Virginia Beach. So there are all these little inlets and waterways. When the back of the house faces water, it drains the finances of the family. It's feng shui 101. So I had her put mirrors so that wouldn't happen. And it was after we'd done all this work. I mean, I couldn't get rid of the columns, but we were able to treat the columns, shift the energy, and cross over any ghosts that were there. And we used mirrors to push the water away. And finally, that house was peaceful. Wow. Instead of, and think about the chaotic energies of death, the columns and the slaves and the bloody floors and the crazy mirrors and the Nazi painting. That was the Nazi stolen painting with the swastika burned into the wood, branded into the wood. That was a hugely difficult job to close that portal. And that house would have affected the houses in that geographic area. It was so toxic. Wow. To me, the portal question is a really good one.
Okay. Thank you for answering those.
Probably a little more than you thought you wanted, but
no, I'm all ears always.
So yeah, that was one of the craziest houses. I've done some really crazy houses, but that was a tough one. So next question.
Oh, geez. Next question. Portals. Underground tunnel. Like I've been.
Okay, let's go back. Okay. Underground tunnels. We know that there are tunnel systems under the United States. There are tunnel systems under countries all over the world. There's a tunnel system that goes from northern France all the way into Turkey. It's been there for 2,000 years. They don't know who built it, but it's huge, and it follows certain ley lines on the earth. So we know that there are tunnels all over underneath the United States. Well, if you're living in a particular house and you have some problems, you won't know that that tunnel is there. And if things feel really strange, again, go back to the simplest solution, which is Occam's razor concept. Put aluminum foil shiny side down on top of it. See what happens. See if it doesn't shift the energy enough that you can continue to live there.
So is that like a dark energies? Is that like a highway for them to kind of
well, considering when you're having encountered these tunnels, they're in the United States, they're basically human trafficking tunnels. So that's a horrific energy. They cleared a house in Tacoma, Washington. Was it Tacoma? Yeah. Anyway, it was, as I'm clearing the house, there was a massive portal underneath it, and it looked to me like it was a human trafficking tunnel. And I encountered a young woman there, and she was trafficked, and they overdosed her, and she died. And she could hear her mother praying for her, and she said, "Did my mom send you?" And I said, prayer works in amazing ways. I don't know your mom, but prayers are answered in a remarkable number of ways. Well, she said, "Can you contact my mom and tell her I'm okay?" And I said, "No, I can't." There would be no way that I could come back and say, "Oh, I talked to your dead daughter and she was trafficked and this horrible thing happened to her." That works really well in the movies, but in real life, people think you're cruel. So you can't do that.
Wow.
So if you have a tunnel underneath your house, what that means is that your foundation is not stable. So that's going to cause problems. It's going to cause a feeling of instability. And you may not know it because a tunnel could be 100 feet underground. And you're not going to know that. So again, your animal might sense something, bringing us full circle.
I'm like, how do you, is it just by remote viewing? Obviously you would be able to find that out, right?
That's about the best way is remote viewing. And even then, that's hard. There's so many tunnels. And a remote viewer can see the tunnel. And there are certain things that I would do with a tunnel. But the homeowner is going to have to do a lot of things in addition once it's identified. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Do you remember when we first talked that when you remote viewed the house, you told me where the portal was in my yard and that I had an underground tunnel that was kind of a spiritual highway underneath my house?
Vaguely, I do a lot.
Okay, I know, I'm sure. So I'm gonna tell you what I do.
Okay.
And tell me if I'm doing it correctly.
Okay.
But daily I ask angels of spiritual police to stand on each end of the house in there, and any soul that needs to cross over to the heaven world, that they assist them, and anything dark from the fourth dimension, that they send it to its appropriate realm right away. Does that work? Am I doing anything?
That works.
Okay.
That works. And what's interesting is if you have that in place and your dog is still reacting, then there may be, if you do the foil, then the dog may go back to being at peace.
Okay.
I had a woman's dog, and she was in La Jolla, and her dog barked at a mirror until the woman thought madness would set in. And I said, "Well, there's a doorway there." So we closed the doorway, and the dog walked away. It's just like somebody turned a switch. I had a guy in Virginia Beach whose dog was constantly pawing at a wall.
Huh.
And he said, "You have to remote view. This dog's just driving me crazy." And there were two ghosts. There was a whole like 5 or 6 slaves who had been murdered after the Civil War was over during Reconstruction. And when they were alive, this man in that life had treated them as he was a physician, and he had cared for them. And in this life, he was sorely depressed and was contemplating suicide. And they knew that. And they were trying to get some way to tell him that he was a good man and he shouldn't take his life.
Wow.
And as soon as I crossed them over, the dog left the wall alone.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's just a jillion different experiences.
Okay, well, you've answered a lot of questions, so I appreciate that.
Well, I think they're all really good questions, and I don't think you're the only person who's going to have those questions. So we'll see how it goes, because the discussion, you wouldn't think animals and portals would be connected, but I think they absolutely are. So you can also see if an animal starts getting really ill in a certain location, or the animal avoids the location because the animal is afraid. That's another indicator. So instead of being frustrated with your animal, pay attention. You might learn something about your home and the predecessor energy that was there.
Okay.
So do you think we're done for today?
I think that's it for today.
Well, we want to thank everyone for listening. And Psychic Children, Psychic People, and the Crossing Over Prayer Book are available on Amazon. You can find the links on GhostHelpers.com. If you have a question that you want Charity and I to address, you can write to me at contact@GhostHelpers.com. Charity, thank you again for joining me today. And we're going to say goodbye, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.